Kia ora, good morning everyone, Richard here, welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at this full frame 9mm f5.6 lens from Brightin Star. This is an insanely wide rectilinear lens that is reasonably compact as well. Now, we have previously reviewed two other full frame 9mm f5.6 lenses on this channel, but this Brightin Star has one very special feature that I think is super useful and could be the reason why you would choose this lens over its competitors. Before I talk about the design and build quality of this lens, I want to show you how wide a 9mm full frame lens is. The official figure says the lens field of view is 132 degrees. But exactly how wide is 132 degrees? Let me first show you an example. This is a photo shot with a 15mm lens. It is pretty wide, but here is a photo that's shot with this Brightin Star 9mm lens. You can see the big difference between the field of view of these two photos. The photo shot with the Brightin Star 9mm lens almost made the 15mm lens looks like a non-wide angle lens. It is dramatically wider and captures a lot more into the photo. Okay, now let's have a look at the lens. This Brightin Star 9mm lens is a completely mechanical lens. There is no electronic contacts, so it has zero electronic features. It is a manual focus lens and it is also a full frame lens. The size of this lens is reasonably compact for such a wide angle lens. The lens body is completely made of metal. The exact weight depends on the lens mount, but it is a bit over 400 gram or 14 ounce. Not exactly lightweight, but also not super heavy. While the overall body design of this lens is very similar to the 7 Artisan's 9mm f5.6 lens that I've reviewed recently, which I will talk about a little bit more later on as well, the bright orange ring, the fonts used on the lens, and the fact that Brightin Star engraved most of the markings, they all make the lens feel a bit more premium, and in my opinion, it looks more interesting and better than the 7 Artisan's 9mm lens. I really like the aesthetic design of this lens. The only thing that I don't like is the lens cap. At least with the sample I received from Brightin Star, it's just a black metal lens cap. Well, it fits onto the lens perfectly, but there's nothing printed on it, there's no company logo or anything anywhere on the lens cap, so it looks a little bit unfinished in my opinion. There is a mechanical aperture ring near the front of the lens. It is one click per stop, apart from one extra click between f5.6 and f8. The focus ring travel is around 90 degrees and the ring is a bit tight, but not in a bad way. There is an integrated lens hood at the front, but no front filter thread, partially because of the extruded front element. I mentioned before the lens has a very special feature, and that is it comes with a rare ND1000 filter that you can screw onto the rear of the lens. This is a super useful feature because it allows photographers to take photos with slow shutter speed easily during the day, as otherwise it is just not easy to add a ND filter to the front of the lens. With the provided rear ND1000 filter, it is possible to take 15 seconds or even 30 seconds long exposure photos during a bright sunny day. This is great for landscape photographers. But I do wish it comes with one more ND filter, something a bit not as dark, maybe a ND100, as the ND1000 could be a bit too strong for some light condition. Now let's address the white elephant in the room, which is the fact that this lens is very similar to the 7 Artisan's 9mm f5.6 lens. The two lenses appears to have very similar design, I mean like virtually identical optics design. both lenses have 16 elements in 11 groups, 5 aperture breaks, 20cm minimum focus distance. All these values are identical. But not just that, if you look at the optics design diagram, they look identical as well. And guess what? Both lenses were even launched on the same day. So are they exactly the same lens in terms of optics design? Well, I can't say for sure, even though I don't see anything to suggest they are not. But let's look at the image quality of this Brightin Star lens first, and then we will come back and talk about it a little bit more. We'll have a look at the image sharpness now. Let's zoom into the center of the photo. At the maximum aperture f5.6, the center is already very sharp. So even when I stop down the lens, there isn't any improvement in terms of center sharpness. And now if we look at the edge of the photo, at f5.6, the very edge of the photo is a little bit soft. Stopping down to f8 would improve a bit, and we reach the maximum sharpness at f11. So it really depends on if edge or corner sharpness is very important to you or not. If not, shooting at f5.6 and the image sharpness is already very acceptable. The minimum focus distance of this lens is 20cm, so it is quite close. However, because it's an ultra wide angle lens, the maximum magnification ratio is not really that high. This is a photo I've shot at the minimum focus distance at f5.6. You can see the magnification is pretty average. If you zoom into this photo, remember this was shot at f5.6, the sharpness is pretty decent already. For such a wide angle lens and the maximum aperture is only f5.6, there really isn't much chance that you can dissolve the background, so bokeh is not important for this lens. In terms of vignetting, let's have a look at this photo shot at f5.6. Light fall off near the corner is quite noticeable. This is not unexpected because this is a ultra wide angle lens and the lens doesn't have a huge front element as well. However, even when we stop down the lens, vignetting is still very noticeable, even when we stop down all the way to the minimum aperture f22. Chromatic aberration is pretty well controlled by this Brightin Star lens. I don't really see much chromatic aberration at all. Even when I zoom into some high contrast area, there's still very minimal amount of color fringing. On Brightin Star's website, they said this lens has nearly zero distortion, and I'm not really sure if I can agree with that. When you're shooting scenes with a straight line near the top or bottom edge of the frame, you can see the lens has quite a bit of barrel distortion. It is not crazy, and consider it is a 9mm lens with no software correction applied. I think it is very acceptable, but it's just not something I would call has almost zero distortion. Because this lens has a very wide field of view and the front element extruded quite a bit, lens flare performance is very important because if lens flare performance is not good, it really limits when and how you can shoot with this lens. Fortunately, this lens has very good lens flare performance, much better than I expected. Most of the time I see virtually no lens flare, and even when I'm shooting directly into the sun, the amount of lens flare is still at very minimum level and contrast remains excellent as well. To get sunstars in your photo, you only need to move the aperture ring one click from the maximum aperture, which means you stop down from f5.6 to f6.7 and you can already get some pretty nice looking 10-point sunstars. I think this is the reason why the aperture ring has a special click between f5.6 and f8 and then is one click per stop. As you stop down the lens further, the tails of the sunstars would become slightly sharper and longer, but the difference isn't as dramatic as most other lenses. So you could just shoot at f6.7 or f8 and the sunstars are already beautiful. One of the biggest selling point of this lens is definitely its rear ND filter. It will allow you to shoot at slow shutter speed even during the middle of the day. But does using the ND filter would give us any noticeable impact to the image quality? Let's have a look at these two photos. The left was shot without the ND filter and the right was shot with the included ND 1000 filter. If we zoom in these photos at 200% zoom, I don't really see much difference in terms of image sharpness. No matter I look at the center or the edge of the photo, the sharpness is still pretty much the same. However, there is one very noticeable difference when I install the rear ND filter. So even though I'm supposed to be focusing at infinity, but once I put the rear ND filter onto the lens, I need to turn the focus range to much closer if I want infinity to be in focus. Now this may sound a little bit weird, but I noticed the same behavior when I was reviewing the TT Artisan's 7.5mm fisheye lens, which also has a rear ND filter. With that TT Artisan lens, once I install the rear ND filter, I also need to readjust the focus and change the focus range to much closer for it to focus at infinity distance. So this is the same as this Brightin Star lens. The rear ND filter must have changed the optics path a bit. And here is another set of photos. This time I shot these photos indoor. Again, the left photo is without the ND filter and the right one is with the ND 1000 filter. The camera settings were pretty much the same aperture, same ISO setting, same white balance setting. The only difference is the shutter speed. The photo without the ND filter was shot at 1/50th second. The photo with the ND 1000 filter was shot with a shutter speed that is 1000 times slower, so it was 20 seconds. Comparing these two photos, the photo shot with the ND 1000 filter is slightly brighter. It is not a huge difference, but you can see that if you put these two photos side by side, if I dial in a negative 0.3 stop adjustment to the photo shot with the ND filter, then the two photos' exposures are virtually the same now. So it means the ND 1000 filter is about 9.7 stop effective, not 10 stop, but I think it is accurate enough. The other thing I noticed is the color temperature is a little bit different. The photo shot with the ND 1000 filter is slightly cooler. Again, it is not a big difference and you may not even notice that unless you do a side-by-side comparison like this. And if we compare the lens flare, I also don't really see any noticeable difference from this side-by-side comparison test. So I think overall, installing the ND 1000 rear filter has very minimal impact in terms of image quality, but it allows you to shoot photo with much slower shutter speed even during the middle of the day. Just remember, you need to refocus the image after you install the rear ND filter. When I did my focus briefing test and changed the focus from 1 meter to infinity, I saw virtually no focus briefing at all. It's only when I turn the focus range to really close, like around 0.5 meter or closer, then I will see a little bit of focus briefing. A 9mm full frame lens is insanely wide. Even though this is not the first full frame 9mm lens I've used, it really still hurt my brain when I switch on the camera and notice how wide the camera can capture. I thought I walked close enough to capture the image I want, but most of the time I end up have to walk closer, a lot closer. Now, it is not really a complaint, it's just a fact what would happen when you're shooting with such a wide angle lens. It's not easy to use, but once you get used to it and figure out how to use it, it can reward you with some crazy photo that you cannot capture using a normal ultra wide angle lens. In terms of image quality, This lens is really good, especially when you consider the price. It is less than $500 US, so there really isn't much that I can complain about. I also really like the aesthetic design of this lens a lot. Brightin Star has definitely stepped up a lot in a short period of time. This is a beautiful looking lens. Even the packaging of this lens is also much better than the previous Brightin Star lenses that I have reviewed. Brightin Star may be one of the youngest and smallest Chinese lens manufacturer, but I can see they really are putting a lot of efforts into their products, even though they are still at the stage of trying out different things. So some of the things they try may not work out as good as they want, but I really respect their attitude, and this is how you can improve. Go back to the topic about this Brightin Star lens versus the 7 Artisans lens. Do they have the exact same optics? What I haven't shown you earlier in this review is that I also did a bit of side-by-side comparison test between these two lenses, and I see virtually no difference between the photo that I capture using these two lenses in terms of image sharpness, distortion, chromatic aberration, sunstars, etc. They are all virtually identical. So while I still can't say they have 100% identical lens design, but it may not really matter as there is just no difference in terms of image quality between these two lenses. However, one big difference is that the Brightin Star comes with a rear ND filter, and that just allows you to take long exposure photo during the middle of the day. It is something that you cannot do with the 7 Artisans lens, or at least not easily, as it just doesn't have the mounting thread for a rear ND filter, and you cannot install front filter easily as well. When I'm working on this review, the price of the Brightin Star 9mm lens is pretty much the same as the 7 Artisans lens. So if I have to choose between these two lenses, I would choose the Brightin Star as it gives me the same image quality, but it has a more attractive aesthetic design and it has the rear ND filter. But if you are a fan of 7 Artisans or you don't need the rear ND filter, then there's nothing wrong with the 7 Artisans 9mm lens as well, as the image quality is exactly the same.